Right now, as you're watching this, you're breathing in a cloud of life. Not just oxygen and a bit of city smog, but bacteria, fungi, plant scents, tiny fragments of soils, and even specks of someone else's microbiome. But you're also breathing in bits of rubber from tyre, microscopic plastics from carpets, etc. In this episode, we're going to unpack what you're actually breathing, why some of it is helping you, some of it is harming you, and how spending time in nature may literally change what ends up in your body. Stay tuned for more. So scientists have a word for the living part of the air, and it's the aerobiome, the community of microbes floating around us. Now, global studies suggest that each cubic metre of air, so roughly the space around your desk, contains anywhere from 10,000 to 100 million bacterial cells, depending on where you are and what the weather's doing. Now, viruses are even more mind-bending, so one estimate suggests that hundreds of millions of viruses and tens of millions of bacteria fall out of the air onto every square metre of the planet every day. Now think about your lungs. A resting adult breathes around 6 to 10 litres of air every single minute. If your local air has, say, 100 to 1,000 microbial cells per litre, which is well within measured ranges, you could be inhaling thousands of microbes every single minute, just going about your everyday. Now, most of these are not germs in the horror movie sense, they're just life. So soil bacteria lifted by wind, leaf-loving microbes shaken off trees, skin bacteria from other people and other animals, fungi from damp corners, plus pollen and spore and dust and all the rest. That living cloud changes dramatically depending on where you are, which brings us to indoor versus outdoors. So indoors versus outdoors, different air, different life. A big urban study in Philadelphia compared microbes in outdoor air with those in buses, trains and subway stations. Outdoor air had more diverse microbial communities and included more soil and plant-associated species. Indoor transit air, by contrast, was dominated by human-associated pathogens. Basically, we turned buses into moving skin and breath terrariums. Similar work shows that outdoor microbiomes seed indoor spaces, but once we close the doors and windows, our activities start to dominate. So cleaning products, ventilation systems, building materials, and sheer number occupancy shape the indoor aerobiome. So in very rough terms, outdoors equates to more soil, plants, water, non-human microbes, and indoors equates to more people, pets, dust, textiles, and whatever you're building is off-gassing. And then we add another invisible ingredient, microplastics. So you've probably seen this in the news quite a bit recently. Well, recent studies suggest that in some indoor environments there can be tens to hundreds of airborne microplastic particles per cubic metre of air, with cars and small indoor spaces often the worst. One estimate suggests that many of us may be inhaling 68,000 tiny plastic particles every single day. So the air is not empty, it's a moving mixture of biology and chemistry, and the question is, which bits matter the most for our health? Okay, the bad stuff, pollution, pathogens and microplastics. Let's get the grim bits out of the way first. You may have heard of PM 2.5 and PM 10. These are tiny particles from combustion, tyres, brakes and dust that get deep into our lungs and bloodstream and are strongly linked to heart disease, stroke and respiratory illnesses. Now PM 2.5, these refer to particles with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less. This allows them to bypass the body's defences, penetrating deep into the lungs and entering the bloodstream. Now we're breathing these things in because of things like road traffic and industrial activities. Then we have airborne microbes that can also include pathogens, things like Legionella in poorly maintained water systems or Aspergillus mold spores in damp buildings. Now air quality studies increasingly find that air pollution can change which bacteria ride on particles, sometimes enriching for potential pathogens, so these disease-causing microbes. So there's an interplay between pollution and pathogens. And then there's microplastics, as we've mentioned. So studies in Europe, Australia and Asia have found microplastics in outdoor and indoor air, often at higher levels indoors. In some big cities, outdoor measurements reach thousands of particles per cubic metre, and indoor levels can be even higher. So as mentioned, we could be breathing in tens of thousands of these particles every day. But where are they actually coming from? Well, most airborne microplastics come from everyday wear and tear. So things like clothing, especially synthetic polyesters and fleeces and nylons. These shed microscopic fibres with every movement. Then there's carpets, curtains, sofas and bedding. These slowly slowly release microfibers as they age. Now, car tyres shed rubber and plastic particles that become airborne along busy roads. Plastic packaging and single-use items fragment into tiny particles through heat, friction, and UV light. Now, household dust acts as a ferry, so it picks up microplastics from multiple sources and keeps them circulating. Even dishwashers and tumble dryers can release clouds of airborne fibres into indoor spaces. In terms of outdoors, microplastics can blow off roads and construction sites, landfills, agricultural fields, and even oceans, so they travel hundreds of kilometres on the wind. These plastics can carry hazardous chemicals and microbes on their surfaces, and early evidence links inhaled microplastics to chronic lung inflammation and potentially increased cancer risks. So yes, what we breathe can absolutely harm us, but that's not the whole story, because some of what we breathe, especially in nature, may also help us. Okay, so the good stuff, nature's aerosols. Let's leave the traffic for a moment and step into a biodiverse green space, a mixed woodland or a park with lots of plant variety, or a coastal heathland. 3 things change immediately. 1. The chemistry of the air. So trees and plants release volatile organic compounds, often called phytoncides in the forest bathing literature, and other aerosols as well. Now, these are molecules that make pine forests smell piney, or eucalypts spells sharp and medicinal. Now, multiple studies suggest that spending time in forests can lower stress hormones, reduce blood pressure, and boost certain immune cells, particularly natural killer cells, which help fight viruses and tumours. And scientists have traced some of these effects to those airborne plant chemicals. 2. Microbes in the air. So outdoor air in green spaces tends to have higher microbial diversity and a stronger signal from soils and vegetation. One review of urban aerobiomes found that core bacterial groups shift depending on vegetation cover, pollution and season, and greener, less polluted areas often host more diverse communities with a lower abundance of potential pathogens, so those disease-causing microbes. 3. Particles. So green spaces can help filter particulate matter, so that PM 2.5 and PM 10, with leaves capturing some dust and pollution, which changes the overall mix of stuff reaching your lungs. So what are you actually breathing right now? Let's paint a quick, slightly terrifying but slightly wonderful picture of a typical day. Morning commute in a car or a bus. So there'll be a mix of exhaust particles, tyre and brake dust, indoor style microbiomes dominated by humans and surfaces, measurable microplastics from car interiors and textiles, often in the hundreds to thousands of particles per cubic metre, and also a lower microbial diversity than a typical biodiverse outdoor setting. What about an office, school or a home? Well, you'll have human skin and respiratory microbes dominate, and microbes and spores from indoor plants and carpets and pets and plumbing, and cleaning chemicals and fragrances and off-gassing from plastics and furniture. You'll also have microfibers and microplastics shed from clothes and carpets and soft furnishings. What about a walk in a park or a woodland at lunch? Well, you might see a spike in plant-derived volatiles, so terpenes and phytoncides. You might see a shift towards more soil and plant-associated microbes in the air, which may be important in training our immune system, and potentially lower microplastic levels than busy indoor or roadside environments. An evening run along a main road versus through a leafy reserve. So same lungs, but very different input streams. The point isn't to make you paranoid about every breath, it's to show you that exposures aren't really random. So you're curating your personal aerobiome cocktail every time you choose a route, or open a window, or decide where to spend your weekend. You can't control everything, you can't bubble wrap yourself from the air, and you wouldn't want to, and corporations and the government and policy, these things often dictate much of what you're exposed to, but you can tilt things slightly in your favour. So here are some practical nature gut-brain aligned ideas. Number 1. Seek out biodiverse green air regularly. Aim for several sessions a week in relatively green, low traffic areas, so parks with mixed vegetation, community gardens, woodlands and coastal paths. Think of it as microdosing your lungs and immune system with more diverse environmental microbes and plant compounds. 2. Increase your good air to bad air ratio if you can. So if you have to walk along a main road, try and take a parallel street with more trees if one exists. Use side streets and green corridors for runs or cycles where possible. At home, ventilate when outdoor air quality is good, and avoid opening windows during heavy traffic or smoky periods. 3. Reduce indoor pollution sources where you can. So favour natural fibres, things like cotton, wool and linen, over synthetics to reduce microfibre shedding. Vacuum with HEPA filters and damp dust surfaces to capture particles rather than blowing them around. Go easy on non-natural scented products and aerosols that add extra chemical loads to the air. Now, each time you choose a walk in a biodiverse park over doom scrolling on the sofa, you're potentially changing what your lungs, gut and immune system are talking to. So key takeaways. If you only remember 3 things from this video, make them these. 1. Every breath is full of living and non-living things. You inhale thousands of microbes plus pollutants and particles every minute. The mix changes dramatically between indoor and outdoor environments and between polluted streets and biodiverse green spaces. 2. Nature changes the air you breathe, and probably your body too. Forests and biodiverse green spaces and blue spaces, so things like rivers, don't just look nice, they release plant chemicals and environmental microbes that may reduce stress and modulate immunity, and in experimental models even alter the gut and anxiety-like behaviours. 3. To some degree you can curate your own personal aerobiome, so you can't control everything about air quality, but you can nudge it. So spend more time in diverse blue and green spaces, reduce indoor pollution and microplastics where possible, and choose routes and routines that tip your breathing towards living leafy air rather than sealed box synthetic air. And I know this isn't always possible for many people in the world, so you can head to my website www.naturegutbrain.com and there'll be some tips that you can use to help improve your indoor environment, even if you live in more polluted environments. If you found this video helpful, please let me know in the comments where you think you breathe your best air in a typical week and what tiny changes you might make after watching this video. And please do me a huge favour and click like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel grow and allows me to keep making these educational videos. Please feel free to sign up to my free newsletter at www.jakemrobinson.com. And remember, stay wild inside and out.